All right, so are you ready to dive into this Diddy case?
Oh, yeah, definitely. This is a big one.
Yeah, it's been all over the news, and we've been kind of following it from the sidelines, but now we've actually got our hands on some legal documents.
Yeah, the actual motion for bail.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So this is Diddy's lawyers arguing that he should be released, before the trial even starts.
Right. And remember, he was denied bail initially, so this is their second attempt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a renewed motion for bail,
Hmm.
which means, things are getting serious.
Things are definitely heating up.
And you always see these headlines, Diddy accused of this, Diddy says that. But this is like a chance to actually dig into the legal arguments and,
Yeah, see how the lawyers are actually building their case.
yeah, exactly. Like, what's their strategy here? What are they trying to prove?
Right, because it's all about persuasion, right? They're trying to persuade the judge to see things their way.
Absolutely. So, should we just jump right into it?
Let's do it.
All right. So one of the things that really jumped out at me was, you know how they're handling this video evidence?
Oh, yeah, the video from the Intercontinental Hotel incident back in 2016.
Right. That seems to be like a key piece of the prosecution's argument, right?
No, absolutely. They're saying this video shows Diddy acting in a way that makes him a danger to the community.
Right. Like he's aggressive, he's out of control, and therefore he should be kept behind bars.
Exactly. But Diddy's lawyers are claiming that the prosecution is presenting a very carefully edited version of that video.
Hmm. So they're not saying the video's fake, they're just saying it's been manipulated.
Right. They're claiming it's been edited in a way that leaves out crucial context and maybe even rearranges the order of events.
They make Diddy look worse than he actually is.
Exactly. They're saying it's designed to fit the prosecution's narrative.
Wow. So, like, what are some specific examples of this? Like, what are they saying was left out or changed?
Well, for example, there's that part where the prosecution claims the video shows Diddy dragging the alleged victim down the hallway.
Right. That sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, but Diddy's lawyers are saying no, he was actually rushing to get some clothes and a phone. He wasn't dragging anyone.
Okay. So it's like a completely different interpretation of what's happening in the video.
Right, and there's also the whole thing with the vase.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. Like, he supposedly threw a vase at someone.
Right, but the defense is claiming that the video doesn't actually show him throwing the vase itself, but rather just its contents.
Oh, so like maybe it was flowers or something.
Exactly. They're saying it was probably flowers, and that this subtle difference changes the whole perception of the event.
Right. It sounds a lot less aggressive if you're just tossing some flowers around.
Exactly.
So it's like the same video, but two totally different stories.
Right, and this raises a really important point about video evidence in general.
Yeah. What's that?
Well, it shows how easily it can be manipulated or taken out of context.
Right. Just because we see something on video doesn't necessarily mean we're seeing the whole truth.
Right. Exactly, and this is something we should always keep in mind, not just in this case, but in any situation where video evidence is being presented.
Absolutely. We have to be critical thinkers and question what we see,
Always.
especially when it comes to something as potentially damning as video evidence.
Exactly.
So, okay, we've got this video evidence that's being disputed, and then there's also the issue of conflicting accounts and witness credibility.
Right. That's another big part of this bail motion.
So the prosecution is alleging that there are multiple victims in this case, right?
Right. And that obviously makes their case stronger if they can prove that Diddy was harming multiple people.
But Diddy's lawyers are saying, wait a minute, hold on. There's actually no real evidence to support that claim.
Yeah, they're saying the prosecution hasn't even spoken to the second alleged victim.
And there are messages between Diddy and this second alleged victim suggesting their relationship was consensual.
Exactly. So the defense is trying to undermine the prosecution's case by saying, look, this isn't a case of multiple victims. There's only one, and even her story is questionable.
Okay, so they're really going after the credibility of the alleged victim.
Exactly. And that's going to be a key factor in this whole case, because if the jury doesn't believe her, the whole thing could fall apart.
Right. It all hinges on her testimony.
Absolutely. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the video evidence. Like, we have to be careful about accepting things at face value.
Right. We have to consider the source, the motivations, the potential biases.
Exactly. And that's especially true when it comes to witness testimony.
Because sometimes people have reasons to lie or exaggerate or misremember things.
For sure. And it's the jury's job to sift through all of that and try to determine what really happened.
And that's not always easy, especially in a high-profile case like this with so much media attention and public scrutiny.
No, it's definitely not easy, but it's a crucial part of our justice system.
So, okay, we've got disputed video evidence, we've got questions about witness credibility, and then there's also this really serious accusation of witness tampering.
Right. That's the one that could really hurt Diddy if the prosecution can prove it.
Because it makes him look like he's trying to obstruct justice.
Exactly like he's trying to cover up his crimes.
So what are Diddy's lawyers saying about this?
Well, as you might expect, they're claiming that the prosecution is taking things out of context.
Of course.
They're saying that the messages that the prosecution is using as evidence of tampering are actually innocent.
Like how? What are they saying he was doing?
Well, for example, they point to one conversation where Diddy was actually encouraging a witness to tell the truth.
That doesn't sound very much like tampering to me.
Right, it sounds more like he was emphasizing the importance of honesty.
Yeah.
And they also highlight that Diddy was actively investigating a potential witness and that he did so in collaboration with his lawyers.
So they're saying it was all part of standard legal defense preparation.
Exactly. They're saying he was simply gathering information relevant to his case, which is perfectly within his rights.
Okay, so the prosecution is saying it's tampering. The defense is saying it's just good lawyering.
Right. And that's where things get tricky, because where's the line?
Yeah, where is the line between legitimate defense preparation and actual obstruction of justice?
It's a gray area, and courts have to navigate that all the time, especially in high-profile cases like this one, where the stakes are so high.
Right, because on the one hand, everyone has the right to mount a strong defense.
Absolutely. That's a cornerstone of our legal system.
But on the other hand, we can't allow people to manipulate or intimidate witnesses to get the outcome they want.
Exactly. It's about finding that delicate balance.
Right, and this brings us to another key argument in Diddy's bail motion, his right to a fair trial.
Right, which his lawyers claim is being compromised by the fact that he's been held in custody this whole time.
Okay, so let's dig into that. What are their specific concerns?
Well, one of their main arguments is that the government has access to all of Diddy's calls and messages, even those with his own lawyers.
Wait, so they're suggesting there's a potential violation of attorney-client privilege?
Exactly. And that's a big deal because attorney-client privilege is essential for ensuring that defendants can communicate openly and honestly with their lawyers.
Right, without fear of those conversations being used against them in court.
Exactly. And if the government is monitoring those conversations, it could seriously jeopardize Diddy's ability to build a strong defense.
Right, because he might hold back information or be hesitant to share certain details.
Exactly. And they're also bringing up a very timely point. The recent Bureau of Prisons sweep of the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Oh yeah, that was a huge story. We even did a deep dive on that a few weeks ago.
Diddy's lawyers are concerned that this sweep and the increased scrutiny it brought could further restrict his ability to communicate freely with his legal team.
So they're basically saying the current climate at the detention center is making it even harder for Diddy to exercise his right to a fair trial.
Precisely. And they're not just concerned about his ability to contact his lawyers, they're also raising issues about his access to other forms of communication that are essential for building a defense, like connecting with potential witnesses.
Okay, let's unpack this. What are the specific challenges they're highlighting when it comes to these other forms of communication?
Well, they're saying that he had to rely on some, unconventional methods because of the restrictions placed on him while he's in custody.
Okay.
So, they talk about his use of this website called Contact Me ASAP.
I've heard of that. Isn't that like a way for people to communicate with inmates?
Yeah, exactly. It's specifically designed for legal correspondence.
Interesting.
And Diddy's lawyers are arguing that this shouldn't be a problem because it operates through the official prison communication system, TrueLinks.
Right, TrueLinks, which is supposed to be monitored anyway.
Exactly. So they're saying if there was anything wrong with using Contact Me ASAP, the authorities should have flagged it.
Okay, but even if it was technically allowed, it still seems kind of iffy, doesn't it?
Right.
Are we really supposed to believe that Diddy's communications weren't being closely monitored given, who he is?
Right. That's a valid point. And it raises some broader questions about privacy and surveillance within the prison system, especially for high-profile inmates.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to monitor communications for security reasons, but it's another thing entirely if those communications are being used to build a case against someone.
For sure, and that's where things get really murky.
So, okay, we've got this Contact Me ASAP thing, and
Yeah.
then what about those phone calls with potential witnesses?
Right. So the document also talks about Diddy's attempts to connect with a potential witness who they refer to as Witness 2.
Okay.
And apparently there were a lot of phone calls between Diddy and this person while he was in custody.
A lot. Like how many?
Well, the government claims over 100 calls.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but Diddy's lawyers say, hold on, the content of those calls doesn't show any wrongdoing.
So what were they talking about?
They're claiming that Diddy was simply trying to understand this person's potential testimony and how it might relate to his case.
Okay, so again, they're arguing it was all part of legitimate defense investigation.
Exactly. They're saying he was just gathering information.
But of course, the prosecution is painting it as witness tampering.
Right, and this goes back to that gray area we were talking about earlier, that line between proper legal strategy and witness tampering.
Right. It all comes down to intent. Was Diddy seeking information, or was he trying to influence this person's testimony?
Exactly, and that's something the jury will ultimately have to decide.
Okay, so we've got the video evidence, the witness credibility, the alleged witness tampering, and then there's also this whole thing about Diddy's public comments about the case.
Oh, yeah, right? He called it a shakedown and said he was being unfairly targeted.
Exactly. And the prosecution tried to use those statements as evidence of obstruction.
Right, like he was trying to influence public opinion and undermine the case against him.
But Diddy's lawyers are saying, hold on, those statements were protected speech under the First Amendment.
Right, they're saying he has the right to speak his mind, even if what he's saying is critical of the prosecution.
But couldn't those statements potentially prejudice a jury against him?
Well, that's the prosecution's argument, but Diddy's lawyers are countering that any potential bias can be addressed through careful jury selection.
So they're saying they can find jurors who can remain impartial despite Diddy's public comments.
Exactly.
It's a tough one for sure.
It is, and this case really highlights that tension between freedom of speech and the right to a fair trial.
Right, because we want to protect people's right to speak their minds.
Yeah.
But we also want to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake in court.
Exactly.
Okay, this bail motion is really interesting. It's like a glimpse into the legal strategies being used in this high-profile case.
It is, and it's important to remember that this is just one side of the story.
Right, we're only hearing Diddy's side of things.
Exactly. The prosecution will have their own arguments and their own evidence.
And ultimately, it'll be up to the judge to decide whether or not Diddy should be released on bail.
Right, and that decision could have a huge impact on the outcome of the trial.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the prosecution's justifications for keeping Diddy detained.
Right, they're saying he's a flight risk that he might try to run if he's released.
And what are Diddy's lawyers saying to that?
Well, they're emphasizing his strong ties to the community and the fact that he voluntarily surrendered to authorities.
Right, he didn't try to hide or run away.
Exactly, and they're also pointing out that he's a well-known figure with a lot to lose.
Yeah, fleeing would pretty much ruin his career.
Right, and they're saying that he's willing to submit to really strict bail conditions like 24/7 security monitoring and restrictions on his communications.
So basically house arrest with a security detail.
Pretty much.
Not exactly freedom, but better than being behind bars.
Right, and they even cite similar cases where defendants facing comparable charges were granted bail under similar conditions.
So they're trying to establish a precedent.
Exactly, and then of course there's the prosecution's argument that Diddy poses a danger to the community if he's released.
Right. Given the nature of the charges, that's a tough one to argue against.
It is, but Diddy's lawyers are trying to dismantle that argument by going after the foundation of the prosecution's case.
Okay, how so?
Well, they're basically saying that the whole case hinges on the testimony of victim one, whose credibility, as we discussed, is in question.
Right. If you don't believe her story, then what do you really have?
Exactly. And they're also bringing up that second alleged victim, arguing that she isn't actually a victim at all.
Right. They're saying the government is mischaracterizing their relationship.
Exactly. They're trying to show that the prosecution's case is built on shaky ground.
So it sounds like Diddy's legal team is using a multi-pronged approach here.
Yeah, they're challenging the evidence, questioning witness credibility, and asserting Diddy's rights as a defendant.
It's like a legal chess match.
It really is.
This whole case has been so fascinating with all the twists and turns.
It has, and it just goes to show how important it is to look beyond the headlines and understand the legal arguments at play.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the celebrity aspect of it all, but at the end of the day, this is about a person's freedom and their right to a fair trial.
You said it, and with that in mind, I think it's time we transition to our final thought for today's deep dive.
Yeah, that sounds good. So after all this, what's the big question we should be asking ourselves?
I think this case forces us to confront the very nature of justice itself.
Okay, I like that. Go on.
Like, is it about punishing alleged wrongdoing at all costs? Or is it about ensuring a fair and impartial process for everyone, regardless of wealth or fame?
Ooh, that's a good one. And it's a question that goes way beyond this particular case.
It does. It gets at the heart of our legal system and its fundamental values.
Yeah.
It does. And as we've seen in this deep dive, those values can sometimes be in tension with each other.
Right.
Like the desire to protect the public versus the presumption of innocence,
Yeah.
like the need for security versus the right to a fair trial.
Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike.
It really is, and there are no easy answers.
Nope, and that's what makes these deep dives so interesting.
For sure.
Because we get to explore these nuances, the arguments, the strategies.
Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that analogy.
The more you learn about a case like this, the more you realize how much more there is to uncover.
Right.
And it reminds us that justice is rarely black and white. It's a process.
It's messy.
It's messy.
So, okay, bringing it back to Diddy's case and this renewed bail motion, do you think he has a chance?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
But I do think his lawyers have raised some compelling points. They've really poked holes in the prosecution's narrative.
Yeah.
And they've made a strong argument about his right to a fair trial.
Right.
So I think it's definitely possible the judge could rule in his favor.
Okay, so we'll have to wait and see.
Exactly. We'll be watching closely.
For sure. And we'll keep everyone updated.
Absolutely. This case isn't going away anytime soon.
Nope. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It is, and it'll be interesting to see how it impacts the larger conversation about justice and accountability.
Right, because this case raises so many important questions.
It does.
About the role of the media, the power of celebrity, the limits of freedom of speech.
It touches on everything.
It really does.
And it forces us to think critically about what we value and how we define justice.
Well said.
Thanks.
So there you have it, folks. Another deep dive into a complex and fascinating case.
And hopefully some food for thought.
Always, as always, we encourage you to do your own research, draw your own conclusions.
Stay informed.
Stay engaged and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Until next time.
See ya.